Hey everybody, I'm the Drink Pro. Today I'm drinking Barrell Seagrass. What's up everybody, Kyle the Drink Pro here with you yet again. Thank you as always for joining me and for clicking that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Today we are reviewing a very highly reviewed pour that I've seen a lot of channels really love. Now as you can see, this bottle is about halfway-ish empty, and I'm reviewing it at this point on purpose because the first time I've opened this bottle and tasted it, I did not care for it. Now, that is something that will happen a lot with various whiskeys. You have to let whiskeys open up sometimes, and other whiskeys you need to drink almost as soon as you open them because they will lose character. It depends on the pour, it depends on your preferences. So this is a very highly ranked whiskey, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now I'm gonna pour out this Seagrass and let it breathe for a little bit, but while I'm doing that, I also want to talk about Barrell as a company. Barrell was founded by Joe Beatrice as an independent bottling and blending company. Now this is actually a very common practice to have independent bottlers in Scotland, but it's a little bit less common, at least when it was founded, in the United States. It has since become much more common. You're seeing a lot of independent bottlers, but when this company was founded in 2013, it was not very common. Now I do want to give some credit to Barrell on their website. They give you a lot of good information about the individuals working for the company and about the pours themselves. They have a lot of fun info about Seagrass on their website. But one of the things they say they strive to do is focus on transparency. Now, they are relatively transparent. It tells you on the bottle where the whiskey is coming from. They are very careful to give you cask strength whiskey so you know what they're blending with. And they tell you what kind of whiskey, so this is a rye, and they tell you the barrels that were used to finish. And there are some notes about the process of that finishing on their website. However, I would love to see percentages. That is one of the big differences that I've seen from companies like Bardstown that I'm not seeing here from Barrell. So Barrell, if you're listening, please consider putting age statements and percentages on the bottle. So if I know you're getting 20-year-old rye from Canada, but you're only putting in 8% in this bottle, I'll have a better sense of what it is. Before I get too much further, I want to go ahead and mention this quarter's benefit. This right here is a Drink Pro tasting board. It is made from a whiskey barrel stave. It has the Drink Pro logo engraved and spots for 4 different Glencairns, and there are Drink Pro Glencairns if you want them. This is only available if you are a expert level or above in the Patreon. You have to join by March 31st as an annual member. If you join by that point, you will get this beautiful tasting board, tasting stave. So patreon.com/thedrinkpro, links in the description. Check it out. Now, one interesting thing before we get into the actual notes of Seagrass is that Barrell's Seagrass product actually is a collaboration with the Ocean Foundation, and a portion of each bottle is being donated to the Ocean Foundation to preserve seagrass. And there's some components in the flavor as well that are supposed to be reminiscent of seagrass. That grassy note, that sea breeze quality, and a bit of this sort of almost fruity, almost tropical note are all things that were sort of intended to be a part of the profile. And you can see that with the finishes. Barrell Seagrass itself is a blend of rye whiskey from Tennessee, Indiana, Kentucky, and Canada. Those whiskeys are then finished separately in 3 different kinds of barrels. They have Madeira, which is a standard fortified wine from Portugal. They have apricot brandy, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then they have Martinique rum. Now, Martinique is actually a Caribbean island that is still a territory of France, but they have been sort of known for making a particular type of rum, agricole rum, or rum agricole, which is notoriously aromatic, much more so than maybe your standard issue rum. So I expect there to be a lot of aromatics from that sugarcane in the pour. You should get some extra sweetness, maybe even some extra spice from the process of those rum barrels. You put all of that together and you should end up with a very interesting, oh no, I spilled it all over my stave. Damn it. There are very interesting detailed tasting notes on the Barrell website about Seagrass in particular. I will look at those notes after I've done the tasting, but I have not read any of them up to this point. One thing I did read on the website was their laundry list of accolades for this pour. A couple of accolades of note. Whiskey Tornado ranked it in their top 5. Fred Minnick said it was his number 2. Dusty Dan put it in his top 5 as well. By the way, I'll throw this out there. Dusty Dan, Bourbon of the Week, and myself are going to be celebrating my 2-year anniversary as a channel. At this date, at this time, I hope you can be there. We're going to do a live blind flight together. I'm really excited. It's been a wonderful experience to have 2 years on YouTube, so I hope you guys can join in. Obviously, the people at Barrell are paying attention to WhiskyTube and the whiskey community. I really respect that. I like that they're listening. I like that they're paying attention. Now I'm curious to see if I agree with all of those accolades, because on that first sip, I didn't agree at all. So just so people know, this is 59.2% alcohol. I have bottle 7271. There isn't any more information about how many bottles were in this run, although I do believe that's on the website. I just didn't write it down. Now, right off the bat, for me, the pear and the rum really stand out. Oh, going back in on the nose, then I can start to get that Madeira wine smell. And if you don't have experience with those smells, rum is always going to have that sweet sugar cane, but it also has a pretty grainy quality to it, at least in my experience with younger rums or with hints of rum like you're going to get from a finish. The wine finish from a fortified wine from a Madeira. Madeira is a pretty broad category, actually. There are dry Madeiras, there are sweet Madeiras. It can be a pretty unique pour, or it can be something that's more common like other fortified wines, but it's good to know that there is a wine component in this, because some people will find any hint of a wine grape, almost tannin-like flavor, and they'll just immediately check out. But this isn't very strong. This is much more subtle than that. But really, the most predominant note for me on the nose is that pear brandy. It really stands out. First thing I get is like stewed pears and, some simple syrup. Then immediately going to that very grassy, almost salty. There is sort of a sea breeze note. I mean, I try not to impart, notes that are from their explanation of what this product is supposed to be into my own head, but it's almost impossible to not do that. The power of suggestion is very strong. There really is a sourness in this that I don't love. That was the initial note I got. It was very strong when I first opened the bottle. At this point, halfway down, it's much quieter, but it's still there. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of finished whiskeys. I'm not the biggest fan of rye whiskey, but still, given how much, people are praising this bottle, I'm surprised to find something in it at all that I don't really like. But again, noses can be deceiving. I've had plenty of whiskeys that I love the smell of them. I thought they were gorgeous, beautiful noses, and then the taste, huge disappointment. So if this one goes the other way, that's good with me. I'm okay with that. One final thought, though, I really do feel like the nose on this is predominantly coming from the finishes. I'm getting a little bit of that wine, grape, Madeira quality. I'm getting definitely the sweetness from the sugar cane and almost a graininess as well. And the apricot brandy, I think I might have said that wrong before and said pear or something. There is a different Barrell product that is some other fruit. I think it's pear brandy, but this is apricot brandy. The most predominant note on the nose here is definitely that apricot brandy. Let's taste this whiskey. Right off the bat, the fact that this is a rye really stands out. I like the finish a lot. That's not something I typically like. Finishes are usually iffy for me, and this was not something I got early on, but the finish in this pour really highlights that fruity note. That apricot brandy and some of the other citrus components from the rye show up on the finish. And that makes this long, peppery finish that starts with that rye grain become this beautiful, fruity, oaky product. That transition from mid-palate to finish on this is one of my favorites. I really like the finish on this. This really did honestly take about half the bottle to aerate, breathe, whatever you want to call it. The second third of this bottle is really hitting the butter zone for me, because on the nose, I'm getting almost all finish. And then on the palate, I get tons of rye and then whispers of the finish. And honestly, that's kind of how I feel finishes should work. Finishes almost always, not always, but almost always, in my mind, are accent notes. You don't want them to be overbearing. You don't want them to take over a pour. If you're trying to do that, blend something in. Canadian whiskey is known for that with the 8.08 rule. You can blend in some, cognac or other fortified spirit and make some interesting products. But that's not what a finish should be trying to do. I think accent notes are the key product that you want from a finished whiskey. And I gotta say, Barrell Seagrass delivers what you want from a finished whiskey. Yeah, man, going back to the nose, after tasting it, the rye is becoming a lot more prominent. I'm almost getting like a cotton candy now, the sweetness. After tasting those rye flavors, the sweetness on the nose becomes even more apparent. And the fruitiness becomes a little bit quieter. The fruitiness shows up on the finish of this pour. Now on the nose, after going back to it, you really end up with a more sweet sugar cane vibe. That Martinique rum is making its impact now. Up front on the palate, I get a lot of creaminess that very quickly dissipates. Grain for sure. On the mid palate, grain grassy. Then a pretty significant sharp like hot pepper and maybe even black pepper, hot pepper at the same time. It kind of dissipates after that. You get this slight oakiness, and then the grapes show up from the wine. The fruity apricot starts to show up. Long, lingering finish that isn't particularly oaky, but does have whispers of oak. This is actually an incredibly complex pour, and it needs time to open up for you to understand and find the complexities. I, again, don't always do this, but today I'm going to add a few drops of water. Number one, because their website mentions having water added, but also number two, because this is such a complex pour and it is at cask strength. I think opening it up may reveal some really unique notes. I'm gonna add like 5 drops, I think. One of the things I found it really can be helpful is adding water to a proof point you're very comfortable with. So if something is 65% alcohol and you typically drink 45 to 50%, proof it down to that place, and then it's a more even comparison to what you're used to. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh boy, here we go, here we go. Honey, grapes, raspberries, obviously apricots, peaches, pears. Oh man, the fruit really comes out to play for me. And it's not just single noted. When I had the full strength on the nose, I got this single noted fruitiness. Now with a little bit of water added, the fruit is really opening up and brightening up in a beautiful way. I mean, I get all kinds of notes. I get like bananas, oranges, blueberries, raspberries, and then the lemon is just kind of on top. This beautiful citrus note that combines a lot of different elements of this whiskey. The rye component, certainly, the sweetness and the sharpness of a sugarcane, perhaps, and then you get all this fruit quality from the apricot and from that brandy. On the palate, I feel like adding water is a trade-off. I get a lot more sweetness up front. It's more my palate, to be honest with you, up front, because it's a lot more sweet and fruity initially. But the mid palate, softer, less grassy, less black pepper, maybe a little bit more herbal, but grassy almost for me has a sharpness that this lacks. And then the finish just falls apart. That's sad because the finish was my favorite part of the full strength whiskey. And then adding some water, the finish really dissipates. So this is a really interesting, complex pour. This is a great pour to nerd out about. If you're a whiskey nerd, you gotta get your hands on some Barrell Seagrass. That's about the best endorsement I can give. Is it one of my top 5 whiskeys of 2021? I don't know, that's hard to say. I'm not a big rye person. It's certainly one of the most complex whiskeys under $100 that I tried in 2021. I would say it's a top 5 rye of 2021 for me. Now, I never did a formal list for 2021. I won't be doing a formal list of my favorite whiskeys of 2021. That's been done to death. Go check out all those other whiskey channels. They'll tell you what to get. But I will say that Seagrass, if you like ryes and you want a top 5 rye list, that one is certainly in it. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining. I just remembered I wanted to check against the notes they have on their website, and I've got them right here. Their nose says high concentrations of bright fruity esters, a perfume-like character, honeydew, melon, and plum, sit alongside ripe apricot resting in the sun. That fruitiness definitely is prominent, but I got a lot of those other notes, that melon they mentioned, the plum they mentioned, and that bright citrusy note, which they don't say citrus, I got citrus. For me, that really came in when I added some water. They also say the underlying rye reveals a sea-like salinity, tarragon, and elderflower. I definitely got that salinity. Tarragon and elderflower elderflower. Those are some bold notes. Not very many people know what tarragon and elderflower smell like. Palate, sweet and juicy. Opens up with pear, lychee, and white grapefruit. I can see the grapefruit. That citrusy note is very front, forward, and prominent. And for me, grapefruit is always super citrusy. It's very acidic. I also mentioned the pear as well, and I was kind of confused at first because I thought pear, my brain immediately went pear finish, like a pear brandy, but it's an apricot brandy, so the pear threw me off. I think I got that more on the nose than the palate, but it's definitely there. Classic rye flavors of cinnamon, rosemary, fennel, and rose hip aren't far behind. I did not get rosemary. Hold on, let me try it again. Well, I don't get rosemary. I do get fennel, definitely cinnamon, rose hip, oh man, now we've got some notes. Unctuous texture and sandy tannins are complemented by a delicate astringency so common to Canadian whiskeys. That astringency is definitely there, and I felt like it was really well balanced. The mid-palate shows up that astringency, and the finish, they say fresh and clean, persistent tannin astringency, and then it focuses on this burst of camphor, chalk, dust, and scorched earth. I gotta disagree with a lot of their finish notes. There is a bit of a char quality, but the fruitiness really showed up for me on the finish when I didn't have it watered down. On the watered down, it does become a little bit more chalky, oaky, charred, but that just really didn't do it for me. They mention with a few drops of spring water as well, which is part of why I wanted to add water. Despite bright notes of passion-fruited geranium, definitely get geranium when it settles down. When you add some water to it, that floral component shows up a lot more. So the geranium is definitely a good note. They mention that a lot of the fruit notes become candied on the nose. Papaya, orange peel, ginger. I don't know about that. They say the palate grows creamier, displaying French vanilla, ice cream, pawpaw, and orris root. Those are bullshit notes. I'm sorry. I'd say about 60 to 70% of those notes I think are worth reading. Some of those are pretty aggressive. I do like this whiskey. I think it's a solid pour. You should consider looking into it. You all keep drinking like professionals. I'm going to finish this glass. Cheers.